Dear students, I welcome you on behalf of Thakur Vidya Mandir High School and Junior College for the remote teaching learning process, where our motto is let learning be a joy and teaching a pleasure.
Let us move towards part 5 of chapter number 3, that is issue of shares, wherein today we are going to understand about issue of shares to existing employees, as well as we are going to understand about the private placements made by the company. Dear students, in our previous video we have already understood about the A category, that is public offer, and B category, that is existing equity shareholders, methods of issue of shares to the existing equity shareholders. Now today we are going to take up the topic as to how a company issues shares to its existing employees, as well as how does it make private placement. Let us move towards the fifth question, which is explain briefly how a company can raise funds by offering shares to its existing employees. Besides making public issue and issuing shares to the existing equity shareholders, a company can also raise funds by offering shares to its existing employees, and there are basically four ways of issuing shares to the existing employees of the company. The first one is ESOS, that is Employee Stock Option Scheme. The second one is Employee Stock Purchase Scheme, that is ESPS. The third one is SARS, that is Stock Appreciation Rights Scheme. And the fourth one is Sweat Equity Shares. So let us understand these four ways in which a company issues shares to its existing employees. Let us now move towards the first scheme, which is Employee Stock Option Scheme, which is also called as ESOS. ESOS is a scheme in which companies sell shares to the employees, by which they become shareholder in the company, and thus they hold a certain small level in the ownership of a company. However, the scheme is meant for permanent employees, directors or officers of the company, or it could also be employees, directors or officers of the holding company or subsidiary company. Now, what is a holding company? A holding company is that type of financial organization that owns a controlling interest in other companies, which are called its subsidiaries. Under this scheme, the company offers its employees the benefit or right to purchase equity shares at a future date at a predetermined price. That is, the price of the shares are already decided by the company in advance, and the employees can purchase the shares at a future date. It is a tool of motivation for the employees of the company for a basic reason that with the purchase of these shares, they become owners and they feel responsible for the performance of the company. However, it also benefits the company because the company can retain the interest of the employees and assure a good level of a performance in the work. Let us now further move towards the provisions relating to ESOS. It is necessary for the company adopting ESOS scheme to follow the given provisions. Company may offer the shares directly to the employees, or it may form an employee welfare trust for the purpose of issuing shares under ESOS. The shares offered under this scheme must be at a price which is lesser than the market price or market value of shares. The employees must be given a minimum vesting period of 1 year, that is, they must be given a time period of 1 year so that they can use their option to apply for the shares that has been granted to them. Company must also specify the lock-in period. Now, what is lock-in period? Lock-in period refers to that period during which employees cannot sell their shares to outsiders. This period is of minimum 1 year between the grant of option by the company and the vesting period. Employees shall not enjoy dividend or voting rights till they actually buy the shares under this scheme. Next, issue of ESOS scheme requires approval of the shareholders as they are the real owners of the company, and they have to do so by means of passing a special resolution at the general meeting. Further, employees cannot transfer their option to any other person. Neither they can mortgage, that is, give their shares as a security for taking loan. Further, the company needs to set up or form a compensation committee to administer, that is, to manage or to control or to look to keep a watch on the operations of ESOS. Lastly, the company also needs to fulfill the provisions which are laid down under the Share-Based Employee Benefits Regulation 2014, which means that besides the provisions given above, which are given in the Companies Act 2013, it must also follow the rules and regulations which are given in Share-Based Employee Benefits Regulation 2014. So with this we have completed the meaning and the provisions related to ESOS. Let us now move towards the second scheme meant for the employees, that is Employee Stock Purchase Scheme, that is ESPS. Under this scheme, the company offers equity shares to its employees at a discounted price, that is at a price which is lesser than the market price, which they can buy at a future date. The company collects the amount on shares purchased by the employees by way of deduction of certain amount from their salaries. This is the basic difference between ESOS and ESPS, because in ESOS no salary deduction is done for the payment of shares. Let us now move towards the provisions relating to ESPS scheme. Firstly, a company has different categories of employees, and accordingly company can offer different number of shares to different categories of employees. Shares issued through ESPS must be immediately listed. Even the shares issued under ESPS will have a minimum of 1 year lock-in period from the date of allotment. That is, during this period, the employees cannot sell its shares to outsiders. Further, just like ESOS, even when the company issues shares under ESPS scheme, it needs to fulfill the provisions of Shares-Based Employee Benefits Regulation 2014. Lastly, even in ESPS, approval of shareholders is must through passing of a special resolution. So this is the second scheme meant for the employees. Let us now move towards the third scheme meant for the employees, that is Stock Appreciation Right Scheme, which is also called as SARS. Under this scheme, employees are given the benefit to receive appreciation, that is, increase in the value of certain specified number of shares at a future date whenever the market value of shares of company goes up, which means that if the company performs well and its market value increases, then the benefit of the increase in value is passed on to the employees through this type of shares. On the date of allotment, company gives a specific number to SARS units which are further linked to the value of the company's shares. At a future date, if there is an appreciation in the value of shares which are linked to the SARS unit, then the employees are paid the appreciation value either in cash or it could be even through equity shares. Further, it is nothing but a form of bonus compensation which is given to the employees if the company performs well and if its market price of shares goes up. Lastly, even issue of SARS requires approval of shareholders by means of passing a special resolution at the general meeting. So the third one is SARS, that is Stock Appreciation Rights Scheme. The fourth method of issuing shares to the employees is sweat equity shares. Firstly, the shares which are issued to the directors or employees at a discount or for a consideration other than cash are called as sweat equity shares. These shares are issued when the company recognizes the efforts and valuable contribution of its employees, that is, it realizes that it is due to the efforts of the employees that the company has earned increased profits, and in that case it decides to issue sweat equity shares to its employees. These shares rank pari passu, that means they are treated at par with other equity shares. There is no difference made between the shares which are held by the employees and the actual equity shareholders of the company. Further, these shares have a lock-in period of 3 years. That is, during this period, the employees cannot sell their shares to outsiders. Lastly, even issue of sweat equity shares requires approval of shareholders by means of passing special resolution at the general meeting. So with this, dear children, we have completed the C category, that is methods of issue of shares to the existing employees in the form of ESOS scheme, ESPS scheme, SARS and sweat equity shares. Let us now move towards the last and the D category, that is private placement made by the company. Accordingly, our next question will be explain briefly how a company makes private placement. When the company offers its securities to selected group of persons not exceeding 200 persons, then it is called as private placement. It thus means that company does not offer securities to the general public but only to certain selected persons. Usually, these persons are selected by the board of directors, which may include mutual funds, institutional investors, etc. It is necessary for the company to issue offer letter for private placement along with application form. These shares can be either fully paid up or partly paid up, and the payment for the same has to be made either by check or demand draft but not by cash. Further, the applicants cannot renounce their rights, that is, they cannot give away their shares to any other person. Lastly, even private placement requires the approval of shareholders through special resolution. Now, there are two ways in which a company can make private placement, that is, rights issue and preferential allotment. Let us now understand about the same. To begin with, the first one is rights issue, about which we have already discussed in our previous video. Thus, kindly refer it from B category, that is offering shares to the existing equity shareholders. The next one is preferential allotment. Whenever the company offers selected securities, that is equity shares or securities that can be converted into equity shares to selected group of persons on preferential or priority basis, it is called as preferential allotment. Usually, they are offered to promoters, existing shareholders, employees, etc. The shares issued under this scheme are fully paid up and the payment for the same is made in cash. Further, these shares do not carry voting rights. Even in case of preferential allotment, approval of shareholders in form of special resolution is needed. Lastly, companies go for preferential allotment as it is less time consuming, it has less paperwork as well as less legal formalities are required. So with this, we have completed all the 4 categories of methods of issue of shares, that is A category, public offer, wherein we studied about IPO and FPO. Then further, B category, issue of shares to existing equity shareholders in the form of rights issue and bonus issue. Further, today in this video, we studied how a company offers shares to its existing employees in the form of ESOS, ESPS, SARS and switch equity shares. And lastly, we also understood about private placement. Thank you dear children for your patience listening.